back to the daily grind, and shout out to the full-time patrons. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
And what is going on, full-time family? It is time to break down and predict this weekend's super stacked UFC 235 card, headlined by Jon Jones versus Anthony Lionheart Smith. But boy, this is probably the most stacked card of the year. I mean, maybe you can refresh my memory in the comments, but if you look at this card, it is insane. I was telling my brother and a friend about this card this week, and they're like, what? All those fights are this week? And these are casual fans, and they can't wait to watch this card. So this card is stacked. You got Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith, Tyron Woodley versus Kamaru Usman, Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. Somehow Tisha Torres versus Weili Zhang found themselves on this super stacked card, which, hey, okay. Not going to complain. But also Cody Garbrandt versus Pedro Munoz. I mean, barring the Tisha Torres Weili Zhang fight, every single one of these fights has a current or former UFC champion. Of course, Cody Garbrandt and Robbie Lawler, former UFC champions. Current champions, Jon Jones and Tyron Woodley. You got Kamaru Usman, Anthony Smith. This card is stacked. But guys, that's just the main card. Do you know what the main event of the prelims are? Jeremy motherfucking Loheathen Stevens taking on Zabit Abe Lincoln Magomed Sharapov. That's not his nickname, but it should be. Misha Cirkunov versus Johnny Walker. Alejandro Perez versus Cody Stamann. Mickey Gall versus Diego Sanchez. Oh my god. We're going to have a full day of fight companion, guys. We're going to be watching this, and we're going to have a full bottle of Proper 12 on deck. We might be getting a little too twisted. We will see. Make sure you tune in. But we can't live stream from this channel, so our live fight companion will be on our second channel, UFC Yankovic. Make sure you subscribe and tune in on fight night. It's going to be a lot of fun. With that being said, let's get into this breakdown of the main card for UFC 235. I'll give you my breakdown and predictions for this main card, and we will start with the first fight of the night between Cody Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz. Former champion, no love Cody Garbrandt, only 2 losses in his professional career, both the current champion TJ Dillashaw, but aside from that, his record was flawless. Now he's going to be taking on the young Punisher Pedro Munoz, and in this fight, as far as who I'm going to pick, you might actually be surprised. Boy, don't quote me on this one, because I ain't said none. I got 99 problems, and picking this fight's one. This is a tough fight to call, you guys. Pedro Munoz is a beast, and he actually has a couple more fights in the UFC than Cody Garbrandt. And Pedro Munoz has beat some tough fighters in his time in the UFC, including Rob Font, Brett Johns, and most recently Brian Caraway. He's currently riding a 2-fight winning streak heading into this fight with Cody Garbrandt, and he's coming off of Cody Garbrandt, of course, coming off those 2 title losses to TJ Dillashaw, but before that, undefeated in his career, and he's got some impressive wins as well over Thomas Almeida and Dominic Cruz. So both of these guys have some impressive wins. Pedro Munoz slightly more experienced, so this is a tough fight for me to call. While Garbrandt is a former title challenger, the most impressive win on his resume in his career has been Dominic Cruz, who is one of the best bantamweights in the world for sure, but his career has been plagued by injuries, so it's hard to know if he was in his prime in that fight. And also, not to mention Cody Garbrandt's team Alpha Male, they had fought against Dominic Cruz, like in their Team Alpha Male versus Dominic Cruz rivalry. Like, I forget the number, but it was like a crazy amount of rounds, like 15 rounds. Like, Dominic Cruz had previously fought a Team Alpha Male fighter like 5 different times, like, and it went the distance. So Cody Garbrandt really had a lot of, you know, in his training camp, he had a lot of people that could help him prepare for Dominic Cruz. And aside from Dominic Cruz, we haven't really seen him beat any of the best fighters in the world. So with that being said, it's hard for me to really gauge Cody's skill level in that sense. We know he's got great hands, and coming out of Team Alpha Male, he's going to have some great wrestling, but where is everything else? Where is his fight IQ? Where is everything when it comes to some of these really good fighters and killers that are, you know, cleaning out the division and shit? So that's what Pedro Munoz is attempting to do. It's not easy to get a title shot at bantamweight, and if you're going to do it, it's going to take an impressive win over a guy like Cody Garbrandt. So Pedro Munoz has a whole lot to fight for here. This is almost a 50-50 for me. I think Munoz has a great chance to win this fight, so I'm going to give him the slight edge. He's fought and beat tougher fighters throughout his UFC career, not counting TJ Dillashaw, of course, but TJ beat Cody both times, so it's not like you can say he beat somebody of that caliber. Pedro Munoz does have more experience inside and outside of the UFC, and he's beat higher level guys. I'm talking about wins. He has 9 wins via submission also, which lets you know he's very well rounded, and he's coming off of a first round KO win over one of the best bantamweight wrestlers in the division, Brian Caraway. So Pedro Munoz is very talented. It'll be interesting to see where No Love's at. He's took a little bit of a break to get his head right after losing this title. I'm sure he's going to be motivated to come back and get on the winning track and looking for another title shot eventually. So I'm giving Pedro Munoz the slight nod, but it's almost a 50-50 for me here. If Cody wins, clearly I'm not going to be surprised. So yeah, I think Pedro Munoz, if he is an underdog, I'll pick the slight upset. Moving on to the next fight, which, like I said, I mean, it's a cool fight. I mean, you know, Weili Zhang's got a nice record, but as far as this UFC super stacked pay-per-view, I think we could have had some Jeremy Stephens versus a beat right here. You know what I'm saying? But hey, it's all good. We'll get some Jeremy Stephens versus a beat just a little earlier in the day to kick off the action. But Tecia Torres versus Weili Zhang, man, in this fight, I'm picking Tecia Torres despite the 18-1 record, and I'll break it down why. Weili Zhang, she's currently riding an 18-fight winning streak. She's 18-1 in her career. She only lost the very first fight in her career. Now she's 2-0 in the UFC. Tecia Torres is currently riding a 2-fight losing streak to 2 of the best female fighters on the planet, Jessica Andrade and Rose Namajunas. I'm for sure taking Tecia Torres to win this fight unless she gets caught in some sort of fluky submission. And that's crazy to say against a fighter that's 18-1. But before her 2 fights in the UFC, when Weili was 16-1, she fought a girl that was 7-8. 7 wins, 8 losses. So, I mean, there's no way she's ready, in my opinion, to beat the best fighters in the world. Weili clearly can win a fight in the UFC, as she's won 2 over Danielle Taylor and Jessica Aguilar, but neither of those girls have ever sniffed the top 10, so I have to give the edge to Tecia. Now, to be fair, Tecia did lose both of the toughest fights in her career, to Andrade and to Joanna, and she is also a little small for this division, which is why I think Weili, of course, has a puncher's or submission's chance, but I'm giving the slight edge to the proven Tecia Torres. Weili Zhang, I mean, even if she wins here and moves to 19-1, she's going to lose eventually. If we're talking about championship level fighting, if you just, you know, look at her resume and the girls she's fought, there's no way, unless she just literally gets lucky against like 3 or 4 of the best fighters in the world in a row. Like, I just don't see how she can sustain that record in the UFC. She starts fighting girls like fucking Tatiana Suarez, Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas. I mean, it's going to be, I think, bad for her. And Tecia Torres is even a hell of a fighter. So I think Tecia Torres is going to welcome her to the top 5, top 10 of the UFC. And you know, she's going to test her a lot in this fight. So I'm giving the edge to Tecia Torres. Moving on to the next fight of the night, we've got Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. This is an interesting fight, man. Ooh, this was hard for me to pick. It's hard for me to pick. I'm giving a slight, ever so slight edge to Ben Askren. He's a little less proven, I feel like, and even just the style matchup, Robbie Lawler has just a great chance of winning this fight. Okay, so let's break it down. Former UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler is back after losing a unanimous decision to Rafael Dos Anjos a little over a year ago. He'll be fighting one of the best wrestlers in MMA, who's making his UFC debut after being traded from one championship to the UFC for flyweight kingpin Demetrius Johnson. This is an interesting fight because Ben Askren has legit skills as a dominant wrestler, which gives him a chance to beat anybody. But he hasn't been fighting guys that are UFC caliber, clearly, since he hasn't been in the UFC. In the meantime, in between time, Robbie Lawler has been fighting against some of the toughest fighters in the world. during his stint in the UFC, which has led him to ultimately becoming the UFC champion. Of course, he lost his title, but he became the champion in one of the UFC's most stacked divisions, the 170-pound division. So I feel like this is a fight the UFC would want Ben Askren to win, given that they just traded one of the best fighters in the world for him. And he seems to be a pretty marketable guy. But that being said, Robbie Lawler, he's fought against some of the best MMA wrestlers in the world. So a game plan of lay and pray is not going to be enough to beat Robbie Lawler. So Ben Askren's going to have to prove how well he can mix all of the martial arts in this fight and be able to show how good he is if he's not going to just rely on his wrestling and beat everyone he fights. You know, he can't just rely on his wrestling to beat everybody in the UFC. Some guys are going to have good takedown defense, and that's when you're going to have to show how good your stand-up is. And what happens if you're that dominant wrestler that comes to the UFC and you can't get a takedown? Where does that leave you? Are you still comfortable, or are you up shit's creek without a paddle? We all know about Ben Askren's wrestling, but what happens if he can't get the fight to the mat against these elite level fighters that he'll now be facing in the UFC? Hopefully we'll get a lot of those answers in this fight. I'm giving a slight edge to Ben Askren to get the W, but this one is 50-50 for me. I had somebody say, hey man, I'm waiting on your predictions so I can make some DraftKings picks. And I would advise anybody that's gambling on this card or playing DraftKings, I wouldn't give you advice. Like, if I was going to give you advice, I would have to like sit down, do research, and look into it. But what I'm saying is, my early advice would be to play light. If you're betting, bet light. This card can go any way. Anybody can win the Pedro Munoz Cody Garbrandt fight. Anybody can win Tisha Torres versus Weili Zhang. Even though I feel like I'm way more confident in Tisha Torres there, Weili Zhang is 18-1 for a reason. She can finish girls. Even though that's probably my more confident pick, Tisha Torres. But anybody can win in this fight. Robbie Lawler, Ben Askren. We've seen Robbie Lawler beat Johnny Hendricks, Rory McDonald. He's beat a lot of the best welterweight wrestlers as far as fighting is concerned. So this is just, a lot of these fights are really tough to call. I'm giving Ben Askren a slight edge to win this fight, but I would not be surprised at all if Robbie Lawler comes out here and pulls off the upset as the guy that's actually been fighting against a lot of the best fighters in the world, you know, for the last fucking 5 to 6 years, compared to Ben Askren, who's been fighting in one, you know, and he's still got serious skills. But we will see Ben Askren in the UFC. So really looking forward to this fight. It can go either way. Slight edge for me to Ben Askren. Moving on to the co-main event of the mother trucking evening. I think this is the fight that I'm here for. Of course, I want to see John Jones and Anthony Smith, but this is, I don't even think people realize what we have right here in Tyron Woodley versus Kamaru Usman. Let me move my check mark back to the center of the screen because I'm not just snap picking Usman like that. Let's get to this breakdown, man. I can't even. This is what we are here for. This is the best fighting the best. You don't get to see this much in combat sports in 2019 because everybody is so busy protecting their padded records and trying to stay on top of the game so they can make as much money as possible. I can't blame those guys for trying to make as much money as they can in the toughest sport in the game where athletes are underpaid, but that's the reality of today. We rarely get to see the best fight the best. With that being said, I can't wait to just watch this fight and see how it plays out, because right now I'm going to give a slight edge to the champion Tyron Woodley, who in my mind is one of the best welterweights of all time. But Kamaru Usman is by far the toughest challenge for Tyron Woodley in this division and one of the toughest style matchups for him. Let me get my green check mark over Woodley's head because I told you I'm giving him a slight edge. But in this fight, Tyron Woodley's only loss in the last 6 years has been to Rory McDonald, who is known as a well-rounded fighter, but specifically one of the best MMA wrestlers. And that is what Kamaru Usman is today. Woodley has fought and beat almost every single style of opponent as the reigning defending UFC champion so far, except the dominant wrestler, which he will scratch off of his list if he can beat Kamaru Usman. Woodley took the belt from the brawler Robbie Lawler. Then he beat the karate master Wonderboy 2 times. Then he had to fight the Jiu-Jitsu master riding a 7-fight winning streak, Damian Maia. Then he beat the oversized, overweight, undefeated Muay Thai fighter, Darren Till. Now he's coming full circle to try and beat one of the best wrestlers and fighters in the world here at UFC 235, and it is a tough matchup. The best fighting the best. So I'm giving a slight edge to Tyron Woodley because I respect this game and how hard he trains and just everything he does and his reign as the champion. That's why I'm giving him the edge, because he's the champion. As far as the style matchup, this is going to be tough for him. Kamaru Usman has a real chance to beat Tyron Woodley and walk out as the UFC's new welterweight champion. He's got the power, the grappling, the cardio you need to be one of the best fighters in the world and give Woodley a great fight. Will it be enough though? Holy shit, cannot wait for this fight. I'm giving the edge to Tyron Woodley, but I just get your fucking popcorn. And this also goes to my DraftKings, or if you're betting on this card. There's not much confidence here. In this fight even in the title fight. Woodley versus Usman, this should be a toss-up for me. I mean, so maybe there's value in like Usman, like if he's an underdog. I haven't even looked at the odds for this weekend. If Usman's like a 2-1 or 3-1 underdog, there's probably some value there. So with that being said, it's time to get to the main event of the evening. Jon Bones Jones versus Anthony Lionheart Smith. I didn't have to write any notes, so I don't even gotta move the fucking check mark for this fight. Come on, guys. We're all going Jon Bones Jones. If Anthony Smith pulls off the upset, that would be cool and stuff. You know, it'd be awesome. And I mean, just for Anthony Smith, for sure. It would be wild. It would be jaw-dropping. Oh my God, Jon Jones just lost with the Picos. Like, it would be crazy. And you'd just have to continue to put respect on Anthony Smith's names. He's been the underdog in the past, and he's shocked the world. You know, he's beat guys at 2 different weight classes, being the underdog, knocked him out. He's got that puncher's chance in this fight. It would be a crazy story if Anthony Smith is the one to dethrone Jon Jones after everything Jon Jones has done and been through. If Anthony Smith derailed that would be fucking crazy. But this is Jon Bones Jones we're talking about, people. And he's got to pull some Picos on his side. Whether those help him or not in this fight, that's just there. It's just something to mention. Either way, he's one of the best fighters in the world. And so, I'm picking Jon Jones. Not picking a crazy upset here. But hey, anything is possible in MMA, which is why it's one of the best sports in the world, if not the best sport in the world. So with that being said, guys, thank you guys for tuning into this video. This is my breakdowns for UFC 235 and my predictions. I got Pedro Munoz, Tisha Torres, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and Jon Jones walking away with W's on the main card. And just for shits and giggles, I'm taking Zabit over Jeremy Stephens, even though I don't like counting out Lil Heath and Jeremy Stephens, but Zabit is just must-watch TV. So with that being said, make sure you tune in to the Fight Companion. We're going to be watching all of these fights live with a bottle of Proper 12 on deck, getting faded throughout. It is going to be litty but giddy. Be there or be square. UFC 237 going down this weekend. 235. And yeah, we'll be live on UFC Yankovic. Subscribe to the second channel. Link is in the description. And let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.